Today, our guest speaker is Purple Heart recipient of the Korean War, and he will tell us a little bit about his upbringing, some of his formal experiences, and his time at the Corps. Please welcome Staff Sergeant John M. McKinney, United States Marine Corps, retired.
It's great to be here. I feel like I know you all already because I've watched you on YouTube. And
He's the first visitor to say that, right?
And I learned something very comforting. Colonel Peoples has taught you critical listening skills. And with that, you'll never hear a boring talk, because if you don't like the way it's going, you're thinking how you could make it better. So I'm quite relaxed. I can't feel you're going to have a fine time, because you're going to be able to straighten me out when it's all over. Also, I'm open to questions. I know Colonel Peoples is very free to answer questions. He'll order them out anytime. I'd appreciate it if you just raise your hand if there's something that doesn't go along, because you might forget it by the time you come back to it. I'd like to begin with my father, actually. I have a picture of my dad in the Marine Corps. He was responsible for ending World War I. He joined the day after his 18th birthday on November 6th, 1918, and the war ended 5 days later. They heard he was coming, and so the Kaiser just quit. And my father never had to fire a shot at an enemy, but he did fire as a competitive rifleman. He was a very, very good shooter. He's got the sharpshooter medal there. He's on the bridge of the USS Idaho. We put that into service. It was brand new, and he got to make a trip to Rio and a trip to Alaska, and he's there with the Secretary of the Navy at that time, Josephus Daniels. A little bit of history there. And I start with him because he was undoubtedly quite influential in the way I was raised. At 2 years of age, I could stand at attention, salute. At 4 years of age, I could carry a rifle properly. At about 6 years of age, I was learning to shoot it. I called him Sir. That was his choice, not mine. He was rather stern, a little disciplinarian, and chances are I needed it. I was left-handed, dyslexic, a little attention deficit disorder, and hyperactive. So I guess I was a handful for him, but he managed it. In 1941, my father was working on Turtle Island at Fish Harbor. And he has a map of Turtle Island. And my mother came out and told me that the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor. Pearl and fish sounded pretty much alike to a 12-year-old. I thought the Japanese had bombed just 7 miles away. So I got my .22, put it on my shoulder and walked guard duty up and down the driveway and watched for the Japanese to come over the hills. And I was prepared to shoot them. I didn't realize the .22 wasn't going to be very effective, but I had a gun and the Japanese were coming. Well, finally, my dad came home from work and we got it straight out that actually the bombing was in Hawaii and Turtle Island was safe. Except it was full of Japanese. That's where the fishing fleet was down there. The whole area where I live, and this peninsula, was farmed by the Japanese. And people were quite concerned that they didn't know where their loyalty lied. They weren't citizens, and we had a lot of Japanese kids that went to school with us. Every day after school, our school, they'd go to their Japanese school for 2 years, or 2 hours rather. And then when it came time to go to university, they'd go back to Japan and go to the university. And they didn't really mingle in the community, and everybody was afraid of them. And so I guess you've probably heard of the internment. Internment. Yeah, they didn't get married, they got interned during the war. And some people look at that as a grievous miscarriage of justice, but they weren't citizens. We didn't know, well, some of them didn't even speak English. We didn't know where their loyalties lay. And it actually saved some of them, because a drunk GI was looking for a Japanese person to kill after Pearl Harbor. They really were. They had fire in their eyes, blood in their eyes. There was a sneak attack. It was dirty. It was terrible. And so I think it really did preserve a lot of lives. I hate it when they apologize for that, because I feel it was necessary. And they also, at that time, rounded up non-citizen Italians and Germans. Those they released a little later after they examined them and made sure where their loyalties lie. At 15 years of age, the war was going on, and I was just missing it. Some of the fellows in high school had gone, and I kind of felt left out. At 15 in 1945, the war ended, and the Army Air Force had a base right on the edge of Lomita. And they flew P-38s out of there. As soon as the war was ended, they abandoned it and they turned it over to the Civil Air Patrol.
There's Lomita,
Yeah, there's Lomita, and the flight strip is
right here.
right there. Yeah, it was really something, 1 mile long runway. So, and then another shorter runway.
You
And
said it's Civil Air Patrol.
Right,
You actually had a Civil Air Patrol picture here?
yes. At age 15. It was wildly popular. There were about 500 cadets in the Civil Air Patrol. They came from 3 communities around there, Redondo, Torrance, Lomita. We had the whole air base to ourselves, all the facilities. They left a link trainer, they left jeeps, they left trucks, left barracks. We had classes in air navigation, parachute packing. They left a C-47 and A-26, I think it was. It's just amazing, the resources we had. It was really a great program.
Here's the P-38s.
Yes.
That they were flying.
These used to fly right over my house every day when they'd come in from training. We were just about 2 miles from the airstrip, or maybe a mile and a half, just right over a rooftop. And everything was quite well till one crashed in town. That wasn't too good, but managed to not hit anybody. He missed the school. He could have actually landed in the schoolyard, except there were some kids out there, and so he missed it and went into a house.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was bad.
Was anybody hurt in the accident, sir?
The pilot was dead, yeah. Just the pilot was all, yeah. So, that Civil Air Patrol kind of gave me a chance to wear a uniform. I'd been wanting to do that for years, and they had a competition drill team, got on that. We marched in parades, marched in the Coliseum, and drill competition. So I kind of got that out of my system. And then between the 11th and 12th grades, I got the chance to go to sea in the Merchant Marine. And I jumped at it. I went to sea between the 11th and 12th grade on a coastwise oil tanker. And then I came back and finished my senior year, and then I went to sea again for another year and a half on an intercoastal ship, and then on a cruise ship down to Acapulco. It was really a good experience. Well, that was time to come ashore, and I got a job in an oil refinery, or oil terminal on Terminal Island once again, where the ships came in and got their bunker fuel. Worked on an oil barge, worked on the tugboat. This all belonged to the same company. That was vacation relief. Did that for a couple of years. And then the Korean War began, and they started talking about the draft. And so, well, if we're going to have a choice, I better join up. So I joined the Marine Corps, and sure, while I was in boot camp, I got drafted into the Army. I'm sorry, I'm committed. Well, boot camp was a snap for me, because I'd been raised like I was in boot camp all my life. Those guys just didn't faze me. I knew how to march, because I'd been in the Civil Air Patrol on the precision drill team. But they did do some odd things that did kind of bother me a bit. Oh, that's from the Merchant Marine. Go down about 2 more, if you would. That's after I retired. I've got to show a little age progression there. Actually, I weighed the same as when I went in the Marine Corps, 200 pounds. But I looked a little different because I got that furniture disease. That's where your chest falls down in your drawers. Yes, yeah, that must have.
Did you want to go into the military all your life? Like as
Well, I did till I got out of my system with the Civil Air Patrol and the Merchant Marine.
Okay.
And then I really didn't have the desire, but then when it came time that I was going to be drafted, well, that's the Marine Corps.
Why did you pick the Marine Corps?
Well, my father was a Marine.
Okay.
I actually had a great affinity for the Navy, having been in the Merchant Marine. But my father was kind of down on the Navy, worked with some sailors, and they'd have just given him heck if I joined the Navy instead of the Marine Corps. I did my dad a favor and went to the Marine Corps. He was kind of sorry that I did, in a way there, that he was influencing it because it really put me in harm's way. Talk about boot camp, and then we'll get to Korea. That's, just the day before I reported. Up out of the shine there. Yeah, you see it's a little bit, I was 200 pounds, same way I am now. Been working in a steel mill, eating 5 meals a day. Felt really good. The day before that, I had a full beard. I was advised to get rid of it before I reported it, so I did.
What kind of car was that?
That's a 40 Ford standard.
Pretty fancy tires there.
Oh, yeah, white walls and moon caps and, did have skirts on, they're off this way. I thought my train of thought couldn't be derailed. Oh, so I got to boot camp. This is what they had us do every Sunday morning. Every platoon changed barracks, and you couldn't make 2 or 3 trips, even if you're only just going a half a block. You had to take all your gear in one trip. And this bucket is what they issue you. That's the first thing you get in the Marine Corps in the way of equipment, is this bucket, and it's got some ties in it, pieces of string about this long that you use instead of clothespins. Tie your clothes to a clothesline. It's got soap and your toiletries, and that stays with you. And then you get your sea bag of gear. Actually, they were taking so many in when I went in, it was about 2 weeks before we got our buckets and our sea bags. Had to wear the clothes we came in, and I'd worn loafers, and they just stretched out. I had to put my foot down and slide it back in. It was a miserable 2 weeks. But they did this every Sunday morning. We changed barracks, and then we had to have a field day in the barracks and clean it up completely, and then have inspection. And I thought it was kind of weird. It was finally toward the end of boot camp I figured out why they were doing that. It kept us from going to church and talking to the chaplain. They were afraid. They're pretty verbally abusive. Nobody laid a hand on you, but they were really in your face constantly. And the bad part and the tough part of it was there was defective people that were in your face. There was people that had been washed out of other programs and really had an issue and just enjoyed tormenting you. And they made it clear before they started this that if you resist or lift a finger, you're going to wind up in the brig and the hospital both in really a hurt city and be dropped back or maybe thrown out. So they didn't want people whining to the chaplain, and I'm quite certain that was the reason. One field day I do remember was along toward the end, and we were getting pretty good at cleaning barracks. And we heard we were going to have an inspection by Sergeant Grimes, and kind of feared everybody just the name. So we gave it an extra good cleaning, and sure enough, Sergeant Grimes came in, his blue trousers with the blood stripe, khaki shirt, white gloves, white cap, looked in the barracks, strode directly across to a window, threw it up, reached up. My God, this place is filthy. I wouldn't let my dog live in here. We'd spent 4 hours cleaning that thing. And that was it, and he strode out. I've never forgotten that. Was an outstanding thing. We had another outstanding part of boot camp was the gas mask instruction. They took us into a little shed about from here to here. There were 36 of us in there. Had our masks on, they filled it with tear gas, and it burned pretty good on your face. Well, that's not too bad, we can stand this. So we were in there just a few minutes and said, okay, take off your masks and sing the Marine Corps hymn. And we had to sing it loud. And boy, that was tough. We really got a good dose of it by the time we just barreled out of there choking. Do you have a question?
Well, I just had a feeling that you were going to say, because nowadays they give you the option of taking your mask off during the tear gas training.
Well, it's an option.
They said you could take your mask off if you want, and mostly everybody takes their mask off.
Yeah, but do they stand around and sing a hymn?
No, not at all. They just walk around this shed a few times and then funnel back out.
Oh. Looks good. Another boot camp trick I fell prey to, I got information one day with a shirt flap unbuttoned. The DI walked up, took hold of it, and says, do you want this? I said, sir. Yes, sir. Here it is. He ripped it right off and handed it to me. So I had a little session with my sewing kit. Well, then we went to the rifle range, and that was almost a traumatic experience. My uncle in the Navy had been on a shooting team, quite distinguished, and my dad was on the shooting team for the Idaho. And boy, if I didn't qualify, that'd be so terrible. They sent us up to Camp Matthews for 2 weeks to snap in and qualify. And I was really under a strain. It bothered me when we were sleeping in tents. It was November, it was getting cold. And so I've got a little wisdom I want to pass along to you here. The targets we shot at were the black bullseye. And principle of it is to get your sight right under that bullseye and then fire. As soon as it's all black, you fire. Now what they did was tell us, don't leave a line of white. As soon as they mentioned line of white, I started looking at that line of white. And what happens if you leave that, you can't judge how much white you're leaving. You don't know whether it's a 64th or 32nd or what it is out there at the end of the barrel. The sight's out at the end of your barrel. So it'd be so much more positive when you give somebody instructions, tell them what to do, not what not to do, because it just somehow locks it in your mind. Following boot camp, got a boot leave, got married.
Where'd you meet your wife?
We met in school. High school, she was
High school
prom date.
sweetheart.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's unusual nowadays.
Well, it's not nowadays now. That was a 22-year marriage. I've been married 62 years, broken time. I was single 4 days in between. I just couldn't stand the loneliness. We're just about to have our 40th anniversary now with my second wife. So I got married and came back to Camp Del Mar for advanced training to be a cannoneer. And I really didn't like cannons, but that's where they put me. It was 105 millimeter howitzers. They're noisy, shells are heavy, they're dangerous. If they have a misfire and hang up, they can be bad. I trained on that, but luckily when I got to Korea, the gun batteries were full because they didn't have many casualties back there. The openings were in the forward observation teams and in the liaison teams that were between the artillery and the infantry. And that just suited me fine because we were kind of like free agents. We were away from headquarters, away from the noise, and we weren't really getting shot at. We were kind of halfway there. There was people around that would shoot you, but it didn't happen very often. And then, while I was in that position, I got assigned to go with the Korean Marine Corps. We were firing support for them. Our artillery was, they didn't have artillery. So that was really a wonderful experience. We've got some pictures of Koreans there. But yeah, well, and in Korea too, that first one there. See the, yeah.
These are in Korea?
Yes, when we were back in the battery, they had cots for us. When we were out in our FO teams, we slept on the ground. And then when we were in the batteries and headquarters company, we were transported like this, didn't have to walk. We'd fill out with our gear and then sit on top of it. And I was occupying this position one day when we came up out of a rice paddy, and it just flipped me right off of that thing. Came down and said, yeah, almost prefer to walk. I was a little casual over there. I'm cleaning my rifle. Here's the stock of my carbine. That was my weapon to carry there. This is while we were with the Korean Marines. It was actually some good times there. It's a beautiful country. Got to where I could hike the hills really good. We ate a lot of sea rations. This is heating sea rations. It looks pretty primitive, but it was neat. And this fellow you'll see a little later. He and I were wounded together.
When you went to Korea, did you know how long you were going?
That was a tough part. They told us it would be 6 months, and our time going over would count. And we got over there, and fellows had been there for almost a year already, and they weren't leaving. And the fellows I went with were kind of losing hope. And I said, no, in 6 months we're getting out of here. So I got there April 1st of 1951. It actually left 2 weeks before from San Diego, went on a troop ship with 750 other Marines. 6 months to the day from when we left San Diego, I got wounded and started home.
Wow, isn't that something?
Yeah, I got my 6 months routine. I kept the faith and I was out of there.
Better for better or worse?
Yeah, this is a Korean intelligence officer, and he's put on a captured Chinese officer's jacket and showing it off.
So it's a Korean with a Chinese
Correct.
officer's jacket.
Correct. And the officer's about the only one you could tell. The Chinese soldiers just had plain tan uniforms and no insignia on their buttons, no nothing. And this one day, a Chinese lad surrendered to me. He didn't have a weapon, and I didn't know what he was, Chinese, Korean, North, South, what, couldn't speak. So I had my carbine on him, and I made him take his clothes off, because we'd heard that they booby-trap themselves and they'll blow you up. So anyway, I took his, had a thing like newsboys used to carry, it's a little pouch. And I looked in there and it was a Chinese grenade, so I was pretty sure I had a Chinaman there. So checked him out, and had him get dressed again, and then 3 Army fellows came by and said, "Can we have him? Can we have him?" I said, "Sure," I didn't know what to do with it. I gladly gave him up, and they took off. And interesting thing happened in that same area. We were running kind of roughshod over them right then, taking some prisoners. And we had an officer, wounded. We had him on the back of a Jeep on a stretcher. It was across the back. And I was walking beside the Jeep, steadying him on so he didn't slip, we didn't have time longer, so he would slip off. And we came to this intersection, it was a T intersection. Well, actually an X intersection. And we're deciding which way was best to go. And stopped with the wheel of the Jeep on some rice straw in the middle of the intersection. We decided we'd take a left. The driver, without moving the vehicle, turned the wheel left, and as he did, it drew the rice straw away, and there was an artillery shell dug in the ground, pointed back up with the detonator right there. It was a landmine. And we had come that close to just rolling right over it.
Blowing each other up.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, it was as close as you can come without it happening.
Wow.
It was really an experience.
So the wheel was on top of the actual detonator, or it was extremely close to it?
No, it was just in front of the wheel. The wheel was here,
Oh, I see.
the straw was over it, and when the wheel turned, the straw came right off of it,
Wow.
and there it was right there. But I'd say 4 inches in front of the wheel.
How about this one?
Oh, right. This is one of the temples up in the woods up there. I'd say it's a beautiful country.
You're in South Korea. Where in South Korea?
No, they called this the rugged eastern central sector. And they gave that to the Korean Marines because they could handle it. They were used to this rugged eastern central sector.
Hold it. Let me pull this up and you show us.
Okay. Good chance to get water.
There you go. There's Korea. So the point where you want to go.
Well, we'll probably right about in here.
Here. Okay. So. Right in the middle.
Yep.
Right. Eastern side.
Yeah. Any chance you get Heartbreak Ridge on
I know the movie.
there?
I don't think they have that probably on that. Let's do, nope, they don't have that in Korea there.
Okay. So anyway, the time with the Korean Marines was very, very interesting. And then
So you're saying this was an example of one of the
the temples.
temples
Right.
are up there, okay?
Right. It was mountainous, of course, where we were, and then there was also streams, there were waterfalls. There was some really beautiful country there. And an interesting thing too, all this time while I was in Korea, we were going back and forth over the same ground. We'd take it, they'd get it back, we'd take it, they'd get it back. I never had to dig a single foxhole while I was there. They were everywhere I went. You just jump in one and you're all set. And several times I was in them when we were under mortar attack. And so they were real comforting right then. You'd hear these mortars come in and go, psst, and I had them like right next to the foxhole and blowing twigs off the tree over me. It landed on me. Just almost could have been in the hole. And eventually it was a mortar shell that got me. But we stopped and talked peace. We advanced up to the 38th parallel, just for the second time, and stopped to talk peace. And the peace talks fell through, so they decided, okay, we'll just jump off and take some more ground. Well, they'd had a month and a half to dig in. They made impenetrable bunkers that couldn't be touched with artillery shells. They zeroed in all the paths and trails that went into their area for their mortar fire. On September 13th, we started out and walked all night long. Well, about midnight, we were up on this trail on the top of a mountain. It was just wide enough for a footpath, pitch dark, and mortar shells started coming in on our line. They had it zeroed in. They knew we were up there, and they didn't have to look or see if they knew where we were. They were getting guys ahead and behind me. We kept going the rest of that night, and I really don't have any memory of it in the morning, but I woke up in a foxhole, and 2 infantrymen had just set a fellow on a stretcher down by our foxhole to take him back. So my buddy, the one that you saw earlier, I told you to watch, and I took the stretcher. We carried him probably a half mile, and then our arms and hands just gave out, couldn't do it anymore. So we passed him off and started back up to our foxhole. And as we were going up, this bridge was fairly wide where we were. The fellow went over and showed himself on the ridge. He was looking over, and my buddy yelled at us, "Don't show yourself." So he took off at an angle. Sure enough, somebody saw him, and a white phosphorus mortar shell came and lit right exactly behind us. It was practically on me. It was just right behind my heels. And I heard it coming. It went, bam, and I could feel the blast, and I'm dead. I just knew I was dead. As soon as I heard that, I knew what it was, and just instantaneously I knew I was dead. And I just started floating out of my body, didn't feel a thing. Floated out of my body, I could see myself down there, and I was leaning over a blown-off tree. My helmet was rolling away, and it was getting higher and higher, and it was probably like 30 or 40 feet up in the air. And I heard this horrible screaming in my ears. Well, if that's me screaming, I'm not dead. As soon as I thought that, I was back in my body, and it hurt like heck. Felt like every guy in my outfit had a cigarette against my bare back, and some of them mean ones had cigars. It was white phosphorus. And this white phosphorus just burns. As long as there's oxygen on it, it burns. It burned the back out of my fatigues. I sat down. Well, actually, I rolled. I wanted to put the fire out, and then I found I was rolling in more white phosphorus. So I quit that and sat there and hollered for a corpsman, and one came over and he said, "Come on, get up." My buddy was just sitting there. He was stunned. He couldn't even holler for a corpsman. He was just sitting there. So this corpsman that got to me, he says, "Come on, get up. I'm taking you back." I said, "Well, give me a shot or something." "No, you wouldn't be able to walk." So he took me by the arm, and so I took off my jacket, and I started a letter. I had it in the pocket here. And so I took that, and I had my gung-ho cap, put that on. And I had to hold my trousers up because the back of them was burned out. And so I went walking back, and there were replacements coming up. This is a weird sight. There's a guy with no shirt, no helmet, walking along. And then I looked back as they looked back at me to see what was going on. And they were horror-struck. My back was all black and blistered and bloody. So I walked a mile back to the battalion aid station. And so that white phosphorus had all that time to burn and work in. My buddy was stunned. He sat there. Another corpsman came to him, took my buddy's canteen, poured it out, made a mud puddle, packed mud on there, and they didn't even have to graft on that. All he had was 1st and 2nd degree burns. So if you ever get exposed to white phosphorus, just get the air away from it as quickly as you can.
So he put mud on the back of his,
Right, on
and
his burns.
his recovery was easier than yours.
Oh, 100%.
And it's just
It stopped the
luck that the corpsman helped him, and yours was more
Right.
stressed about getting you out of there and not get
He was stressed about getting him out of there.
getting out and not get shot.
He wanted to get out himself. That was why.
Right.
Yeah, the only corpsman I've known was like that. The only one I've ever heard of. He wanted out, and I was his ticket out. So we, that one now. No, this one with the helicopter.
Okay.
Yeah, so I walked back to the battalion aid station, and they wrapped me with Vaseline gauze, and that took the oxygen away from the white phosphorus and stopped burning. They gave me some morphine, and then they put me in this basket on the side of this, just like the MASH, if you ever got to watch the MASH outfit. I got to ride in the basket with a big fan blowing down on my back. It just felt so
Do
good.
you remember that?
Oh, vividly. And we went down ravines. They stayed low so they wouldn't be subject to fire. Went down ravines. Face down, I could see everything to a MASH unit, just like that. And spent the night there. As soon as I got there, I took my letter and finished it. It was half written. I told my wife I hoped she'd get that before she got the telegram, and she did. So that worked out well, and be able to explain it. I was hospitalized in Japan, and in an army hospital for about a week. They took real good care of me, had a trapeze for the bed, a lot of care. And every day they'd take me in and debride my wounds and pour copper sulfate on them and then cut the dead skin away. Yeah, it was quite extensive because it got pretty deep and down around tendons. That was a long, long process. Then the Navy caught up with me and sent me to